Hi, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. I'm excited to be here today because we're going to be talking about my first love. My first love was radio, and I have to tell you this story because it's very unique. You guys know I was a fat girl, and every summer my parents will take me to the beach. For me, the beach wasn't a pleasant place. I was 14, body shaming society, and I was in the beach, and also you see how white I am. So me and the sun never mix really well. And so I was bored as hell. And confession, I really don't like the sand. But I was at the beach, and I saw this tent, and there was a radio in the beach and having a program every day from the beach. And so I went in and said, of course, I want to see what this is about. And they had a contest, and I won that contest that day. But the contest was to go to a nightclub. I was 14, so I could not go to the nightclub. And I think that the guys felt really sorry for me. So what happened next? They offered me to be their assistant for the day. And guess what? They like me, so they asked me to come back next day and the following day and the following day. And that's how I started in radio. And then they told me that you have a cute voice and you have a lot to say. So you know that there is a teen show. Would you like to be part of that show in the evening? And I said, sure, I'll do it. And that's what I was 14, and I had a career in radio, which was insane. So every summer I would work in radio. And over the years, I kept working on radio, as you know, moved to television. And that was something that it was always in the back of my head, how much I loved it and how much fun I had. And over the years, I had to learn a new language because, as you know, I didn't speak a word of English. And I started having this idea of having a podcast, and I ran it by a few friends. And their feedback was, I don't know, you should do that. Who's going to want to listen to you and with an accent? I never had a podcast with someone with an accent. And I had to make a decision there, either to cry or just say to fuck off. And I decided to go for the second one. And here we are in coffee number 5 with over 100,000 downloads, thanks to you in the other side, and thanks to our amazing guests. Today, I want to celebrate, and I invited someone special that has this passion for podcasts as well. So welcome, Billy. Billy, I'm gonna let you say your last name because I suck. So just tell us your last name.
You're good. Yeah, it's Saleebey. It's a Lebanese last name, and most people don't know how to pronounce it. So great to be with you, Lara, and I'm excited to dive in and talk about podcasting, something that we both have a passion for.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was very interesting. As you know, I own an agency, a marketing agency today. And during pandemic, I had so many people that we had to extend my production team from my podcast to accommodate my clients that they want to do podcasts. During pandemic, I feel like everyone and their siblings and their mothers want to do podcasts. How do you feel that happened too?
Yeah, we got into this mode where everyone felt they needed some outlet, some creative outlet. They were home. It could be baking bread, it could be gardening, or it could be starting a podcast. And to your point, so many people started a podcast in 2020 and even in 2021. And so what we saw was this boom. And I think the good news is it brought even more awareness to the podcast space. And the other reality is that we're now getting back into a state of life back to normal as it could possibly be. And a lot of people who started podcasts, they may not do it anymore. So we saw a lot of podcasts start. We saw a lot of podcasts stop. And I think right now we're in this phase and this evolution of the platform where I think we're really starting to become almost like a teenager, right? We were, in the early days in 2004, 2005, we were a baby. And then we became a toddler, and then we had our, preteens. And then I think now we're a teenager. And when you're a teenager, that's where you really start to have your own identity. And I think podcasting is in that mode right now where we are beginning to establish what this medium will be as an adult. and as it matures.
We even see that platforms are flirting with podcasts. Even Facebook decided to put podcasts. And yesterday, we got the announcements that podcasts are not going to be uploaded anymore. So I think finally podcast is really finding their space and where it belongs and what it doesn't belong.
Very true. And you never know why someone gets into a space. And when I mean by someone, I mean, you got these juggernauts like Facebook. What made them decide to do it to begin with? And how much effort did they actually put in? I think they were testing the water and they decided to abandon the strategy and not do it. And that's their right to do. And I think ultimately what they probably realized is podcasting is not easy. And I think that's what most people don't realize. Yeah, it's not.
Done well, it's not easy at all. And also, at the end of the day, it's revenue. Facebook wants revenue. And the reason we do podcasts is to grow. At some point, you do podcasts for pleasure too. But how easy is to get money in podcasts? Like you said, and I think you're totally right. We're teenagers, and these teenagers need to start making money.
That's right. We can't, the paper route and, the small odd job here and there is only going to do so much. And like anything, it does come down to the money, the financial part of it. And I think a lot of things are still up in the air in terms of monetization. I think what I'm seeing happen more and more is figuring out the right method of monetization for each individual shows. And so we can get into that if you want, but
yeah, absolutely. I would love to get into that. Let's do it, because I feel like a lot of people they feel like they have a message, they have something to say, but they want to turn this, like a lot of people during the pandemic, they want to turn their hobbies into money.
That's
and
right.
It's not that easy, and success overnight doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, a podcast is a lot like a book. If you think that you're going to write a book and then all of a sudden you're going to be a best-selling author without any promotion, you're going to be disappointed. And podcasting, when you make a podcast, it's like throwing it out into the ocean and expecting somebody will find it. You have to create a magnetic pull to your show. And you're in marketing, so you understand the importance and the value in establishing a connection between a product, a good, a service, or something like a podcast media, and making it easily accessible, making it easily findable. And I look at the new person starting a podcast, and most of the time they have the wrong expectation of how they can monetize their show.
What's our expectation?
Well, what they see is they see all the other podcasts out there. They see that they're advertising, and they think that traditional advertising is the right method. But the stark reality is, unless you have hundreds of thousands or millions of downloads an episode, traditional advertising won't work, because it's a CPM model. You're getting paid for every 1,000 downloads or listens, $30, $40, $50 at the most. So it doesn't take a math genius to figure it out. There's really 4 methods to monetize a podcast. The most commonly thought of is advertising. But again, let's take that aside, because most people can't really make money that way. The second way is you get a sponsor. And a sponsor works great if you have a very definable and it's clear who your audience is. Niche oriented shows, highly targeted. I have a friend, somebody I interviewed named Harry Durand. He's got a show. It's called the Vertical Farming Podcast, and it's very hyper niche. And sponsors want to talk to people in the vertical farming space. So now he's got tier 1, tier 3, tier 4 packages of sponsorship, and he could get, $1,000, $2,000 per sponsor. The third way is you sell other people's products through affiliate links or products you believe in. And the fourth way is you sell your own product or you market your business. You use it as a way to find clients, either who are your client could be a guest that you're interviewing, or it could be somebody that listens to your show. The easiest and the quickest way to monetize is the last way, right? You have a product, a digital product or a hard product that you sell, and you use your podcast as a way to create awareness. That's the easiest way to do it. That's the landscape. And then if you want to go into any one of those, we can talk about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love how clear you were. And also there is one more that I want to mention. I don't know, maybe probably you put it inside the other one of the categories that you mentioned, and is pay per play. When you reach some point of so many downloads, in order to have it, because you become popular, you have people that they want to pay to be in your podcast.
Yeah, that is another way. And I think and by the way, there's a lot of other movement happening, such as a subscription-based model, or people who want to donate to your show. There's Patreon, and there's tons of other models where if you have a big enough audience, people will say, hey, I'll pay $2, $3, $4, $5 a month to get special bonus content for your show. And so that's another way that people can monetize their platform. And it's something that's really trending right now. But to your point, some people, they have the ability. I have a friend who's got a crypto show. It's a Web 3.0 show. And people are like pounding down his door to get on his show. And guess what? He started to charge them to be on the show. So that's another way you can monetize. Absolutely.
Yeah. So why did you start your show?
You know, it's a great question. I started because I love learning about people and I love creating things. So I left Tesla. I was a global leader at Tesla, and I had a great
That was
run.
my next question.
Yeah, we could talk about that. I had a great run there, and I loved being part of a company that was doing something meaningful. And so I wanted to do something that was going to make an impact. And I saw the momentum building in the podcast space. And I just saw the trajectory of how we could communicate on a very intimate level with an audience. There's nothing more intimate than hearing the sound of someone's voice, the vibration of their voice. And that's powerful. And guess what?
Powerful.
It's not, it's not just a 2-minute thing. You talk to somebody for 20, 30, 40 minutes. That's deep.
I have to tell you, the biggest crush in my life was with the voice of someone that I will listen every night, 7 to 11 p.m. Every single day. That connection with the voice is so unique.
It really is. It's special. You can't quantify the feeling and the emotional connection that you make with someone who you spend a lot of time with. And I'm really, really, I'm excited to see where this industry goes, where podcasting generally goes, because to your point, you never know the connection you're making. Like the person who you made that connection with, they may not have known that connection existed, because it's a passive listening arrangement where you're speaking, and then maybe asynchronistically, it could be at the moment if it's radio, but in a podcast, it could be in a year. Somebody hears you, they resonate with you, they respond, they connect, and that it's super meaningful. And so in the same way that Tesla could make an impact, I feel that podcasts can make an impact on the lives of other human beings, which is why I decided to go that direction.
Absolutely. And I feel for me was for 2 reasons that I started with the podcast. First of all, because I love the radio and I want to connect with people in its special way. But the other reason was because I really was tired of people being taken advantage of. I feel like also during pandemic, there was this growth of people that they became coaches. And I'm using quotations here, sure. Because they are coaches of something that is not proven, or just coaches of, they believe that they can teach. They try to make an easy buck. And I feel like I want to bring those people in and have a conversation with the real thing, so I can give my audience tips and tricks and education that comes from the real leaders of industries.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because when you have that platform, you can highlight and elevate the people that should be elevated, but also educate in a way that will help prevent people from learning from the wrong people or going down the wrong path. Because to your point, I mean, it seems like everybody's a coach these days. Well, we know when everybody is a coach, not everyone should be a coach. And
absolutely.
I think you're the type of person that will help to shine a spotlight on the right people and avoid the wrong people.
Absolutely. And I feel in my industry, at least, you always have a friend or a sibling or someone whispering in your ear and telling you, because it's really easy to do Instagram or Facebook, and because you have the tools. But it's the same. I always say I work with doctors, and I can go and buy a surgical kit. Doesn't mean that I should use it.
Yes, exactly. They're practicing for a reason.
So why are the right reasons for someone to do a podcast?
I think the first thing you got to figure out is, why are you going to do a podcast? What is your intention? And everything should be built around that. Most people who start a podcast, they get excited about an idea, but they don't really think through, why is it that they want to do this? What's the long-term proposition or goal of doing this show? And if it's to become famous, 99 times out of 100, that won't be the result. So figure out what's important to you and map out a strategy that will allow you to reach the goals that you have. Kind of look at it from with the end in mind. If you know what the end looks like, and by the way, the end shouldn't be 6 months or a year down the road. Think 5, 10, 15 years. Absolutely. Podcasting is a long-term sport. And so figure out ways to give yourself the timeline and the time horizon to do the things that you want to do. To answer your question more specifically, I think anybody that wants to share a message, wants to talk about something they're passionate about, should consider a podcast, but also consider not doing a podcast. Look at it from all angles. Don't obsess, don't get overly analytical, but get analytical enough to think through, like, what's the long-term reason that you're doing this, and find something that you'll have what I call a sustainable interest in. A long-term sustainable. I love
that you say that, because I always call it a sustainable strategy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that doing podcasts is hard. Why is it hard?
There's a lot of things that go into it, from the standpoint of, is it an interview show? Do you need to find guests? Or if it's not an interview show, do you need to prepare the content and do the research? And then everything else that goes into it, the editing, the marketing, the making sure that you're doing every part of the equation to the best of your ability. What happens more often than not is things get abandoned. Most of the time, it's the marketing. People think they should spend 80% of their time on the content, 20% of their time on the marketing. I say flip that around. Spend 20% of your time on the content and 80% of your time on the marketing. Now, everyone's a little bit different. Some don't have the bandwidth, so maybe you need to hire a team to help. But a good percentage of the time spent, whether it's your own time or the time of a team that you hire, or a team that you have internally, a good percentage of that should be spent in audience development. Develop your audience. Because if you don't develop your audience and build a community around your show, you're just talking to a microphone and no one's listening. And that might be good for your feeling, but it's not really doing anything what you probably intended, which is to share something with someone else. And so I say flip the priority. I mean, content's important. I'm not saying it's not, but it shouldn't take up 80% of your time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you need to support it either with a Facebook group, email marketing. There are so many strategies, always social, but you need to make sure that you create like an ecosystem around your podcast.
You said it. Look at it like you're a media company. Don't look at it like you're a podcaster. So there's so many things. There's a newsletter, there's your Instagram, there's your YouTube, have whatever assets you have. Podcast is one pillar, but you have all these other pillars, and collectively they create really a media company. So are you looking for partnerships or collaborations? It's not just one dimensional. You really have a wider breadth of what you do and who you speak to. And that's why the community building is so critical.
You got me thinking, because also, I mean, I see a lot of people that they don't take in consideration the technical part of doing a podcast. There is nothing worse than having a bad audio experience. And I mean, if I hear something that I cannot understand the person who's talking, or there's too much background noise, that's something that I will not go back. even if it's very interesting what they will say. I just cannot. It's just annoying.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty easy to get good sound. You just got to do a few things right. To your point, the background noise, and you never know. It could be an air conditioner, a fan. It could be the computer making a noise, an appliance, a refrigerator, and it does become distracting. That's why getting the room and the environment as quiet as possible. And what I always remind people is get soft things around you. Your audio, your own voice wave carries. And when you get soft things, it could be pillows, it could be blankets, it could be towels, it could be a couch. Soft things absorb sound. And so the more soft things, the better. I joke that a hoarder would make a great podcaster because they got all this stuff around them.
Absolutely. And also something like for me as a must in podcast is always to have a producer presence in the podcast. So they can always be listening if there is something happening, and they can give us warnings saying, hey, something happened, let's retake it. Or the other thing, I'm a big fan of recording in 2 channels at least. So you can, if you need to fix it one voice, you can, or the other one. I mean, you never can guarantee your guest. I mean, in this case, you're a fantastic guest, you have your microphone and everything, but some guests, they don't. And it's having those noises, if you can clean it up in post-production, for me, is it's an user experience. You need to make the experience of your user better and better each time.
Yeah. You can't control your guest, but you can guide your guest and direct them in the right path. Because to your point, sometimes you get a guest and they may not have all of the things they need to get a great sound audio recording. And yes, having separate discrete channels for your guest, for you, for anything else that will be included will help to create not only a better end outcome, but easier on the editor. It's always better to get a good solid recording than it is to try and clean something up in post. I always say, focus on 3 things with recording. Number 1 is the environment and the surroundings, which we already talked about, the soft things and things around you. Number 2 is your mic technique, how close you speak to the microphone. Like if my microphone's way out, testing, it's right there. You want to get that.
I have it right above my head.
Right above your head. Yeah. So getting the microphone as close as you can. I use the 4-finger rule. So it's like 4 fingers from my mouth.
Mine is like 5.
Yeah. So get it as close as you can. The closer, the better, because you're going to, it makes it sound so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to get that. And then the equipment itself, right? So just getting the right equipment. Now, the equipment's the last on the list because honestly, any mic is better than no mic at all. And so just getting a microphone that is an external microphone as opposed to using your computer microphone is always going to be better.
Yeah. Let's go with the process of having a guest. Is every guest a good guest? How do you know it will be a good guest?
First, it comes down to your show, right? And be an advocate for your audience. Who would your audience love to listen to? Who would your audience be so excited about listening to that they cannot wait for your episode to drop? So that's the first thing. The second thing is have high standards. You're going to get people as a podcaster banging down your door to come on your show. And just because they've asked doesn't mean you should say yes. You have to have some clear vision on who is the right guest for your show. So think about it from a perspective of if you're going to write out, call it a paragraph of the type of guest that would make a good guest for you. And it could be a variety of things. Maybe it's their experience. Maybe it's milestones in their career. Maybe it's social media following. Maybe it's, there's so many different things that you want to look at that add to this recipe for your guest. And the more clear you are, the better. So for example, I have a show Inside Out. So it's like, I want to talk to world changers, people who've done something so significant that the world is different as a result of them being here. So maybe they've broken a record. Maybe they've influenced X amount of people. Maybe they've changed an industry. Maybe they've done something so significant that we know who they are because of their contribution to the planet. And then, I got another show, For the Love of Podcast, where I'm interviewing podcasters. It's like, okay, this person, I either want somebody in the Podcast Hall of Fame, somebody that's interviewed some extraordinary people, somebody that has X amount of downloads, like all these variables collectively help to create benchmarks for what you're looking for. And continue to refine this, get as clear as you can about who the right guests are. And then you make a list from there, and then get specific when you reach out. Don't just reach out and say, would you like to be a guest? No, like, hey, I love your show, or I love this, or I saw this article that you wrote. It resonated with me. Here's why. I have a show, and I'd love to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I feel like a lot of people are missing out is the audience of their guest. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to get a big exposure through your guests too.
Totally.
So it's that their audience could be a good match for your audience. Mm-hmm. That is an important factor for me.
Yeah. And it goes with you going on other shows as well as them coming on your show, that there's needs to be some synergy between the audience type. They don't need to be exact, but some crossover, some carryover. So the guests that come on your show, if they're nice enough to promote and suggest people listen to the episode they were on, and they do that and they have a big audience, that could help grow your audience. Uh-huh. Likewise, if you go as a podcaster, you go on other shows in your niche, don't look at them as competition, look at them as collaboration partners.
Always, absolutely. So before we go, because we're running out of time, and I always say that the podcast shouldn't be longer than a car ride, because I will wait in the car like 2 or 3 minutes for a podcast to finish, but I will never go back. So I want to ask you this question that I ask absolutely every guest. What was that mistake that you made and beginning or later making podcasts? Sure. But that's a mistake that you learn. You learn so much from it.
The biggest mistake I made was doing it on my own without having a guide. I think there's so many people that have been down the road that I wanted to go down, but I kind of just figured it out on my own. And I think if I had a guide, somebody that's done it, who's been where I want to go, and can share it with me, that would have helped accelerate my growth and my journey. And so I wish I could have done that earlier on and incorporated people who I respect and admire, who could give me some of the steps I needed to take to get to where I wanted to go a lot faster.
Yeah, I totally believe in mentorship. So Billy, where people can find you and where they can find your show? Yeah,
well, I already mentioned Inside Out. So it's Insight Out Show or theloveofpodcast.com. Also, I have a podcast production company, and that's Podify, PODIFY.com. Feel free to schedule a strategy session. I'm happy to work with you and learn more about your show. And for anyone that's active on LinkedIn, I'm very active there. You could check out my posts. I do a lot of posts about podcasts, and then send me a DM and let me know that you heard this show, and I'd love to connect and learn more about you.
Absolutely. I'm going to be connecting right now with you on LinkedIn, and I'm going to make the connection. Well, perfect. Billy, thank you so much for having coffee with me today.
Thank you for having this opportunity to have coffee, and I'm excited to listen and learn from you, and I appreciate what you're doing and putting it out to the universe. And I'm so glad that you started despite the naysayers, because if you listen to the naysayers, then you're letting other people dictate what you do, and that's never the path to success.
Never. And I never was a good listener. So why to start now?
There you go.
So you guys, I'll see you next week to have more coffee on coffee number 5.